I have been doing this long enough to know the difference between offseason optimism and something real. Every franchise in this league manufactures hope in April. Press conferences, depth charts, practice footage, all of it filtered through the public relations instinct of organizations that need their fan bases emotionally and disappointment that I genuinely do not have the bandwidth for. I think about this franchise, I need you to understand that I am not saying it lightly. I am not saying it because the story is convenient or because the content calendar demands a positive Raiders take. I am saying it because the evidence keeps pointing in one direction, and I have spent real time looking for a credible counterargument and cannot find one. Let me tell you about a NFL franchise attempting to rebuild its identity from the ground up, but stay with me, because this cabinet is the most important object statement ever could. Inside that cabinet sit visors, the shields that players wear on their helmets. Standard equipment in the NFL, the kind of thing you just assume arrives with the uniform and the signing bonus and the locker assignment. Except in Clint Kubiak's building, the visor does not come with any of those things automatically. It is not part of the welcome package. It does not get handed to you because you were selected in the first round, or because your contract carries guaranteed money, or because your agent has a relationship with someone in the front office. It sits in that cabinet, and it stays there until the coaching staff decides, through direct observation of your actual competitive work across actual evaluated practices, that you have demonstrated enough to deserve the right to wear it while representing this organization on the football field. That is the explicit policy. Kubiak announced it publicly weeks before camp began, and on the first day of rookie minicamp, every player who walked onto that practice field, including the players this organization just invested real draft capital in, walked out there without a visor on their helmet. Every single one of them, no exceptions. I want you to really think about what that communicates and why it matters beyond the motivational poster version of this story, because the easy version treats it as a nice detail about a new coach setting high standards and then moves along to the injury report. That is not the version I am interested in telling you. The deeper version is about what the absence of that standard produced in that building over the preceding years, and what it actually costs to put it back in place authentically, because you cannot fake this kind of policy. The moment you create a standard around earning something and then make an exception for a player whose draft position or salary demands special treatment, the entire framework collapses instantly. The shield becomes theater, the cabinet becomes a prop, and players in an NFL locker room are sophisticated enough to identify theater from 100 yards away and adjust their effort levels accordingly. The fact that this policy is real, visible, and enforced without exception on the very first morning of the very first practice under this new staff tells you something essential about the kind of organization Kubiak is genuinely constructing. This is not accountability through speeches. This is accountability made physical and daily and impossible to compartmentalize or ignore. Every player who walks into that facility every single morning sees that cabinet and understands exactly what it means. Nothing here is given. Everything here is earned. That is the entire message delivered without a single word needing to be spoken. The Raiders held the #1 overall pick in the most recent draft. That single fact tells you everything necessary about the depth of the hole this organization has been climbing out of. Having the first selection means you lost more games than every other team in the league. It means the previous approach failed not partially but comprehensively. It means the foundation being constructed right now has to be built differently than whatever came before it, with more intellectual honesty and more rigorous evaluation and more genuine accountability for the distance between expectation and result. For the first time in what feels like a very long stretch of difficult and frankly demoralizing seasons, I actually believe this franchise has aligned the right pieces simultaneously. A head coach with a coherent philosophy and real organizational staying power, a quarterback who fits the system and carries genuine franchise-altering potential, a front office building intelligently without the kind of desperation shortcuts that produce salary cap disasters and roster holes 2 years down the road. All three of those things existing at the same time, in the same building, pointed in the same direction, is considerably rarer than most people acknowledge. The Raiders have that alignment right now. The work is making sure everyone inside that building feels the full weight of what it means to be part of earning what comes next. Now let me tell you about Fernando Mendoza, because the quarterback situation is where every conversation about a rebuilding franchise ultimately lands, and this one deserves more precision than it has been getting. Mendoza walks onto the practice field for the first time in silver and black, number 15. And before a single throw has been analyzed or a single competitive rep evaluated, there is something visible in the way he carries himself that tells you a great deal about his psychological relationship with pressure. He does not look like a player processing the weight of where he is. He does not look like someone managing nerves or performing confidence for the cameras pointed at him. He looks like a player who has been building toward exactly this kind of moment for a long time and arrived at it feeling prepared rather than overwhelmed by its significance. In evaluating young quarterbacks, that psychological readiness is dramatically undervalued in most public analysis because it is harder to quantify than arm strength or release time or completion percentage in a controlled drill setting. But it predicts developmental trajectory better than almost any of those measurable things, because a quarterback who is genuinely comfortable competing under pressure gets better faster than one who is talented but psychologically fragile when the environment becomes difficult. Mendoza looks comfortable. In the most professionally uncomfortable setting imaginable for a young player, he looks like he belongs there, not like someone auditioning for a role he is uncertain about. Let me spend serious time on Kairen Crawford because the coverage of this pick has been frustratingly surface level, and the actual football argument for him is significantly more compelling than the draft slot conversation has implied. Third round, Auburn, edge rusher. If you heard that description and filed it under decent depth selection with some developmental upside, I understand the reflexive reaction completely, but you have not watched his tape with the right framework. Let me tell you what I actually see when I watch him play, because it reframed my thinking about this selection in a meaningful way. Start with the raw physical reality before you analyze a single technique or a single rep outcome. Crawford plays at close to 6 feet 5 inches. That kind of length at the edge position is a genuine competitive asset in this league. The arm reach to disrupt a tackle's hand placement before he can establish the leverage he needs to control the rep. The wingspan to hold the edge against the run from a position of structural advantage that shorter rushers cannot replicate. The extension to affect passing lanes even when the rush does not fully get home. Long edge rushers are premium commodities in the NFL for real and legitimate reasons. But the thing about that kind of frame and that kind of length is that it almost always comes packaged with a specific and predictable sacrifice in movement quality. When you build a body that tall with the proportional limb length that comes with the frame, you typically see compromises in lateral agility, in directional change at speed, in the ability to redirect accumulated momentum when an offensive lineman successfully reads your initial movement and attempts a counter. These are not character flaws, they are physics, and Crawford does not make those compromises. The way he redirects his body in space, the way he absorbs a tackle's counter move and adjusts his attack path without losing his base or his structural positioning, the way he processes spatial information in real time while his body is already fully in motion. That is elite movement quality for a player built the way Crawford is built. Not solid, not promising, elite. When you find that specific combination, genuine length paired with genuine movement athleticism at that level, in the same player at this premium position, you take very serious notice, regardless of everything else you are looking at. Now here is the dimension of Crawford's game that I believe is most predictive of his professional ceiling, and it is the thing that receives the least attention in most prospect analysis because it requires actually watching the tape carefully rather than scanning statistical outputs. Crawford already has a real conceptual library of pass rush moves he is actively working with. Double hand swipes, a ghost outside speed move that creates the threat of width before he redirects back inside. Skate jumps off the line, swim moves initiated from different alignments to create different leverage problems for the tackle. These are not the same fundamental move renamed for different contexts. These are distinct conceptual approaches to solving the problem of the offensive tackle, each designed to create a specific type of advantage against a specific type of response from the man across from him. Most college edge rushers at this developmental stage have identified one thing that gives them success, and they run it repeatedly until a competent offensive line takes it away and exposes the absence of a counter. Crawford is already operating with variations. He is already conceptualizing this position as a problem requiring multiple solutions rather than a contest of raw athletic dominance. That is genuine pass rush instinct. That is the intellectual component of playing this position that separates players who become contributors from players who become starters from players who become stars. Is the execution consistently clean? No. Is the timing reliably right across a full game's worth of reps? Not yet. When he goes against Monroe Freeling, Himself a first-round selection and a legitimately capable offensive lineman, the setup on his cross-chop move is not convincing enough, and Freeling reads it comfortably and handles it without particular difficulty. That rep exists on film, and I am not pretending otherwise. But here is what that specific rep actually tells me about Crawford's developmental profile. He is attempting a sophisticated technical move against a first-round offensive tackle as a college prospect. He is not just lowering his shoulder and hoping his athleticism creates a problem before the tackle can set his feet. He is thinking about the rep. He is working a specific concept with a specific intended outcome. The concept is not executing at the level required yet, but the concept is present and active in his approach to the position. A concept that is already present is a coaching problem. A coaching problem is something Rob Leonard solves. Leonard is the most underappreciated element of this entire Raiders rebuild, and the Crawford pick cannot be fully understood without accounting for what he brings to this specific type of raw material. His track record developing defensive linemen who possess genuine movement traits and genuine pass rush awareness is not organizational talking point material. It is a documented pattern across multiple years and multiple players in environments where the standard of defensive line coaching was exceptionally high. When you hand Leonard a player who already has the physical tools Crawford possesses and already demonstrates the pass rush conceptual awareness Crawford shows on his college tape, the question is not whether development happens. The question is the timeline and the ultimate ceiling. The hesitation move alone, one of the concepts Crawford is already actively experimenting with in his college film, when it is deployed with proper timing and proper setup and a tackle who has been conditioned to respect the speed move outside, is enough on its own to make Crawford a consistent NFL starter. He is working variations of it as a college prospect against first-round talent. Give Leonard 18 months to refine the timing and install the counters that make it genuinely dangerous, and you have a real weapon at a premium position. That ceiling is not optimistic speculation. It is a projection rooted in what is already visible and what is known about the coaching environment Crawford has entered. Positional value in the draft market is also not a trivial conversation here. The exact same physical profile, the exact same movement quality, the exact same developmental trajectory at a running back produces a 5th or 6th round selection at best. At tight end, the market reacts similarly. At edge rusher, you are in the top 90 picks every single time without exception, because the NFL's market pricing of this position is correct. Genuine pass rushing talent with Crawford's physical foundation is scarce in a way that the competitive reality of building a franchise accurately reflects. I believe this pick is going to look significantly better 3 years from now than it looks today to people who are currently underwhelmed by it. Tyrie Wilson has been speaking publicly since the trade to New Orleans was finalized, and some of what he has said deserves an honest response. First, genuine credit. He acknowledged that discussions around the trade had been ongoing for some time before anything became public, and that both sides managed those conversations with real organizational discretion. Nothing leaked during what must have been a complicated negotiation process. That is a professional competence worth acknowledging before saying the harder thing. The harder thing is this: 7th overall pick. That draft slot carries the expectation of a franchise-altering player, someone who changes the competitive arithmetic of the team that makes the selection for the next decade. That investment did not produce that outcome in Las Vegas. Multiple years of competitive opportunity flowed through that selection, and the return did not justify the cost. Acknowledging that plainly is not an attack on Wilson personally. It is an honest accounting of what was at stake and what the result actually was. Where his public reasoning loses me is in the stated preference for New Orleans as the more stable environment. Kubiak is not a placeholder. He is a football architect with a coherent team identity and every organizational reason to remain in Las Vegas for a sustained period. Fernando Mendoza changes the franchise's competitive projections for a decade if he develops the way the tape suggests he can. The infrastructure of a legitimate contender is being assembled with patience and structural intelligence. I hope Wilson finds what he is looking for. I am genuinely uncertain whether the stability he is seeking is more available in New Orleans than the situation he departed. The undrafted free agents deserve real attention because this is where significant quiet roster value gets built and then ignored by almost everyone until it is impossible to ignore. Isaiah Jada at offensive tackle carries lateral movement quality and hip flexibility that honestly surprised me on tape. Tackles with that kind of athleticism in their feet do not typically go undrafted, which suggests something in his background or evaluation gave teams concern, but the physical tools visible on film are real and represent exactly what a good offensive line coach can develop in a depth role. Corey Ruckers from Arkansas State grabbed my attention immediately for a specific and unusual reason. He breaks tackles at a rate that is striking for a receiver. He is not separating from NFL corners with elite straight line speed. That is simply not his game. But at over 210 pounds, with the vision and physicality to convert underneath completions into extended gains by refusing to go down on first contact, he represents exactly the kind of after-the-catch weapon that Kubiak's offensive system can deploy as a genuine chess piece over time. Roman Hammy ran the ball at Indiana alongside Fernando Mendoza for years, and the familiarity factor between a quarterback and a running back is not the soft evaluation point it superficially resembles. The timing on passes to the backfield, the way each reads the other's movements in protection and in space, the shared experience of working through the same offensive concepts under competitive collegiate pressure. These things are built over real accumulated reps, and they transfer to the professional level in tangible ways. Hammy is not a featured back, and no one should expect him to be. But what Kubiak needs from a depth back is vision, spatial awareness, and the ability to operate within the system without creating problems. Hammy fits and brings the additional dimension of already understanding the quarterback's tendencies from years of shared work. Caleb Offord is the fourth name I want to place in your memory, and how I discovered him tells you something about the kind of player he is. I was deep in Mendoza's Indiana tape, focusing on quarterback mechanics, and Offord kept appearing in my peripheral vision, making plays that undrafted prospects at that level simply do not typically make. Physical and decisive against the run, breaking up passes with anticipatory timing that suggests he is processing the quarterback's release before the ball arrives rather than reacting after the fact, playing with a genuine edge on stunts that makes him difficult to account for in the blocking scheme. Players who force their way into your attention while you are focused on something else entirely are the ones worth carrying forward. Keep his name somewhere accessible. The Raiders released Jamin Davis, and that stings in a way I want to be honest about, even while accepting that the people inside that building had information and context I do not have access to. He came into this league as a first-round selection for real reasons. The physical tools at linebacker were undeniable, and the rawness that top evaluators identified as something worth investing in was genuine. It simply never found the right developmental alignment. Leonard, who built his reputation developing linebackers in Baltimore under a demanding and detail-oriented defensive system, is precisely the coach who might have provided that alignment. That opportunity did not materialize. I hope Davis gets another serious shot somewhere, because I do not believe he has had the right coaching environment yet, and I believe the talent genuinely warrants one more real opportunity to express itself properly. Here is what I need you to hold on to as this offseason develops, and the public narrative around this franchise continues to take shape. A shield sitting in a cabinet until you earn the right to wear it is not a motivational detail. It is the entire thesis of what this organization is trying to become, expressed in a single, visible, physical, daily reality. Nothing in that building is assumed. Nothing is guaranteed by your draft position or your contract value or your reputation coming through the door. Everything has to be competed for every single morning, or someone with less status and more hunger will step in and compete for it while you are calculating what you are owed. That is what genuine accountability looks like when it is real rather than rhetorical. That is what a winning culture actually feels like in its early construction phase, before the wins have arrived to validate the approach. The Raiders are building something with real structural integrity underneath the surface optimism, and for the first time in a considerable stretch of painful seasons, I find myself not just hoping, but genuinely believing in what they are building. That distinction matters to me, and I am not making it carelessly.